All right, here we are with another question someone has sent in, and this is a good one. Mr. Pearl, according to my testosterone levels and my performance, I am losing my manhood. That's kind of over dramatic. I am 37 years old. Is God punishing me for using porn? Frustrated, he calls himself. Well, you know, God doesn't need to punish you for using porn. Porn carries its own punishment. It's something the Bible says a sin different from all other sins, in that it's a sin against the body, it said, and that makes it different because it actually does destruction to your normal humanity. Now, science has discovered a connection between porn and low testosterone. Now, being 75 years old, I want to make it clear that there are other reasons to have low testosterone other than porn use. By the way, I'm taking this from, I have about a 3 or 4 hour series called The Science of Addiction and the Brain. And so I'm pulling this from that. It's kind of a spin-off. You might want to look at that. That goes into much more detail, okay? Low testosterone can be physical or mental. Now, what do we mean by physical? Well, you get to a certain age, and it should be around 65 or 70 before it starts being totally depleted. If you're major depleted, if you're a healthy person. But if you're good and healthy, then you can be like me, 75 years old, and still be punching it out. So I'm not there yet. Now, another thing can lower your testosterone is just being tired and sickly. There's a lot of men 30 years old that are tired and sickly, poor diet, and their testosterone goes down, and they're not using porn. So I don't want the ladies out there to think if your husband's got low testosterone, that means he's using porn. Another thing that causes low testosterone, other than bad diet, is fat. If you get fat, it can certainly reduce your testosterone. Now, the Bible says the wicked desireth the net of evil men, but the root of the righteous yieldeth fruit. So there is a net today of evil men. It's called the internet, and it comes mostly out of, you guessed it, LA. And that is a place that you can get entangled in the net and experience destruction. Now, they have a machine called the functioning magnetic resonance imaging machine, or the MRI or fMRI. Now, I've been in an MRI machine, but they have one they can hook up to your brain with lots of electrodes, and they can see your brain in action. They can actually see the different parts of the brain, and the part that is receiving signals, electric signals at that point. They can see the blood flowing and know what part of the brain is activated. And they've been able to map the brain so that they know where emotions are, good, happy emotions, sad emotions. They know where reasoning is. They know where sight and hearing and sound. And every part of the brain, and brains have it all in common, are isolated. Take a big office building full of lots of rooms. One room is the electronics room. Another room is storage. Another room is cafeteria and vending. And all these different rooms, when you see the light on from a distance, you say, okay, looks like all the people are in the cafeteria. See another light on. You can tell where the activity is by the lights that are on in the brain. Now, researchers can see porn use in a brain. There are parts of the brain that light up that says you're porn use. In fact, they can see it when you're not looking at porn and not thinking about porn. They can see parts of the brain that have been beefed up and strengthened to be porn receptors. They can see effects that the porn has had on the reasoning part of the brain, on the emotional part of the brain, on the intimacy part of the brain. Now, I'm not making this up. Get online. It's quite common information. So they can see your porn use. You are actually changing your brain whenever you look at porn. Your body's designed to produce hormones in response to stimuli. You have happy chemicals and sad chemicals. And these chemicals and hormones in the brain are what triggers the synapses, like a switch, to send a signal out. And that signal coming from that part of the brain may go to 10,000 places in the brain. It's amazing how the brain works. It's far superior to anything, all the computers in the world put together. And so the body is designed to produce these hormones. But the body produces more or less hormones depending on use. And the brain forms connections with different parts through these hormones based on how it's used. So the brain changes structure to accommodate the use made of it. Now, what do we mean by that? Take this hand right here. I can shake a man's hand and I can tell if he is a carpenter, a bricklayer, or a city-dwelling office man. I can tell if he's a farmer, different from a carpenter, because different muscles in the hand develop based on the kind of use you make of it, just like your body does. I can look at a man in a Walmart and tell you he's a farmer and he's got cows. I've often walked up to him and said, how your cows doing? Oh, yeah, I mean, how many head you got? Oh, about 100. I can tell just by looking at their body, the way they walk, the way they stand, the way their muscles are developed. There's uniqueness about every occupation in the way it affects your body. Well, your brain is affected and changed, strengthened or weakened based on how you use it. Now, these synapses, this in the white little thing there, the connections, are formed and pathways are strengthened or diminished according to the way you use them. You know, I throw knives. You've seen me do that, and tomahawks, and I can take a spot the size of your finger and stick a tomahawk in it 3 times straight in a row. I don't know how to do that. I practiced for many, many, many years. And what I've done is, it's not muscle coordination, it's not muscle memory, it's brain memory. The brain forms connections with all of the muscles so that all that works in sync. I'm not thinking about it. And somehow I'm able to throw a tomahawk from 16 feet and hit a golf tee and split it. Now that amazes me. Well, the use of pornography does the same thing to your brain. It perfects it as a pornographic brain. It perfects it as a brain of lust. And other parts of the brain, like intimacy, like love, like compassion, like reason, diminish with the strengthening of your porno brain. Now, associations are made that do not exist naturally. Let me give you an example of that. I have never drank a cup of coffee. I'm not against coffee. Coffee is actually good for your cancer fighting. But I've never drank a cup of coffee. You know why? Because when I was a kid, my mother and daddy smoked and drank coffee at the same time. And I so despised the smoke, by the time I got up about 10 years old, I wouldn't be in the room with them smoking. And I'd smell coffee and cigarette smoke at the same time. So here I am, 75 years old, and when I smell coffee, I identify it with the stinking, rotten, filthy cigarettes. Now, I can't help that because 2 things happened in my brain at the same time: the smell of cigarette smoke and the smell of coffee. When I was in college in sociology or psychology class, I've forgotten which, and they had pictures of men looking at porno magazines, and the women had gas masks on. This was back in the 60s, and the film might have come from the 50s. But what it was, in England, during the bombing of England, when the teenage boys would jump up and run down into the bomb shelters with their parents, huddled together, and a girl sitting knee to knee, 2 feet away, and these boys were going through puberty. The girl's wearing a gas mask, and she's got a little nightgown thing on, and the boys lusted after the girls and the women in these confines, everybody wearing gas masks. So when they got 25 years old, they liked to look at naked women wearing gas masks. I didn't understand that. I laughed at that when I was in college. You see, they'd formed an association between their natural desires for females and gas masks. Weird, is it not? Well, associations can be made with porn and whatever occurs at the same time. Now, Stephen Hyman, a former director of the National Institute of Mental Health, says, when a human being or other animal performs an action that satisfies a need or fulfills a desire, the neurotransmitter dopamine is released into the nucleus accumbens and produces pleasure. That system is called the reward pathway. When we do something that provides this reward, the brain records the experience and we're likely to do it again. In other words, that hormone that gives us pleasure puts a stamp in the brain and says, do that again. That's why when you go somewhere and you have fun, like you may went on a vacation when you were 15 years old and had such fun, you won't want to go back there again. Or someone, you have such fun around them, you want to be around them again. So when you watch pornography and it gives you pleasure, the brain is stamped with a desire to repeat that. The more you do it, the more the brain wants to repeat it, and that's how addiction develops. Now, researchers found that when the patients with sex addiction viewed pornographic images, they had greater activity in 3 particular regions of the brain. This is what the professor says. The ventral striatum, the dorsal anterior, and the dorsal anterior cingulate, and the amygdala. So they could see the activity of the pornography in those parts of the brain as they would light up. Now, what does that mean? A German study says men who report watching a lot of pornography tend to have less volume and activity in the regions of the brain linked to rewards and motivation. In other words, they lose the normal desire, the normal motivations for the issues of life. I've seen people who looked at a lot of pornography that just become unproductive generally. They just do not seek the reward of work or accomplishment because they just sink and emerge into the dark world of porn. It's as though the normal machinery of motivation is no longer functioning. That doesn't happen necessarily early, but there are many people report that start using porn as young teenagers, that by the time they're 22, the brain is completely reformed. All addictions affect the lower central portion of the brain, the cortex, that regulates learning and reasoning. So a lot of kids in school today can't learn because they started looking at pornography on their phone when they were 6, 7, and 8 years old. Now, Simon Kuhn said, quote, we found that the volume of the so-called striatum, a brain region that is active when people see sexual stimuli, was smaller the more pornography consumption the participants reported. In other words, that precious, wonderful part of the brain that experiences sexual, erotic stimulation and pleasure, and I thank God for it. God made that. God created that. The people that look at pornography lose that. It takes them longer and longer and longer to get it up until they reach a point to where their testosterone drops and their desires diminish to where they can't get it on with a female. Only in pornography can they be sexually stimulated. And then it takes more and more pornography that's darker and darker until normal female, male activity no longer interests them. And then they get involved in stuff like animal sex, child sex, and then they get into blood and violence, bondage and sex. And so eventually all of the different passions, dark passions of the human is brought into the sexual drive. And the brain links all these things together. So they see blood and they're aroused. They see children and they're aroused. They see animals and they're aroused. Their imagination goes. But then when they come to a normal female and seek to have intimacy, there's no intimacy there. You can get online and read of non-Christian, unsaved men, 21, 22 years old, confessing that they've lost their drive for females. They just cannot relate to a female now. All they can relate to is the imaginary world of pornography. So that part of the brain that would normally experience sexual arousal diminishes. You overfeed the brain and the imagination with sexual stimuli, and the brain says that's too much. We're getting too much. Let's cut that part of the brain down. So the brain adjusts and adapts to be less stimulated because the brain tries to keep an equilibrium of chemicals and hormones. Otherwise, there's burnout. So by this overstimulation, you actually kill that which you're seeking to have, which is eroticism. Moreover, the connection between the striatum and prefrontal cortex, which is the outer layer of the brain associated with behavior and decision making, learning, and reasoning, worsened with the increase of porn watching. This is what the researchers are saying. In other words, the part of the brain that's stimulated with pornography begins to lose connection with the part of the brain that makes moral judgments and decisions. So the brain is segmented, so the normal interaction that you would have where you have a desire, but the moral part of your brain comes in and checks, is that desire okay? The reasoning part of the brain comes to play and says, is this safe? Is it wise? Is this productive? Is this what you really want to do? So all the different aspects of the normal, healthy brain come together so that we're able to look and say, well, I may have a desire that way, but it's improper, it's unholy, it's unhealthy, it's not productive, it's dangerous, or even you could go to jail for it. And so your impulses are checked. But with sufficient pornography use, you lose connection, you get reckless, you get dangerous, you do things that's going to put you in jail, you do things that's going to destroy your life, you do things that's going to destroy your reputation, your family, your marriage, your children, because you no longer have those checks and balances with the warped condition of your brain. The brain of a porn addict comes to resemble that of a lesbian. A man addicted to pornography, brain comes to look like that of a lesbian. Now, the law of frequency. The more often two things are linked, the more powerful the association becomes until they become inseparable. So when you look at pornography of a female and you're aroused, but just out of curiosity or accidentally you come across a child and you are aroused by that child. See, that's not normal. I have never in my life been tempted or aroused by a child. That is so foreign to me. It's just like eating chicken poop sandwiches. It's just not something I would ever think about, imagine, or conceive of, or be tempted to do. And yet there are millions of men in America aroused by children. They weren't born that way. They didn't go through puberty and that happened, that take place. That's not something that grew up 18, 19 years old. No, that's something that's induced by two things taking place: normal sexual drive and lust for children. So you can build lust, you can build homosexual lust, you can build all kinds of lust by bringing an association together. And it makes me so mad. I want to stomp the face of any man that would sexually use a child. I don't like the idea of hell, but I would create a hell for people that sexually abuse children. God already has. Unto the pure all things are pure, but unto them that are defiled and unbelieving is nothing pure, but even their mind and conscience is defiled. They profess that they know God, but in works they deny him, being abominable and disobedient unto every good work. They're reprobate. That's what happens to you when you get on the road to pornography. You not only diminish your testosterone, you diminish your humanity. There comes a time when the use of pornography creates a slippery slope that takes you further than you wanted to go and keeps you longer than you wanted to stay. I've seen a lot of people like that. People have written me like that. They write as if they're writing from hell, and they're hopeless. Confession of a porn addict. This is what one actually said. He said, the more you do it, the longer you do it, the less of you there is left. It was a 22-year-old young man that said that. The more you do it and the longer you do it, the less of you there is left. You just become a habit, a hole that needs filling. Man, that's dark. And receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meat. This sin of fornication, unique to all others, he said, you receive in yourself the repayment, the return of the error, which was meat, suitable, it's fitting. Something happens inside. God gave them over to a reprobate mind, talking about the brain, to do those things which are not convenient. Now, Professor Dines, author of Pornland, How Porn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality, says this: porn is a public health issue with documented negative effects on young people, distorting the way women and girls think about their bodies, their sexuality, and their relationships. Pornography corrupts the ability to be intimate. It pulls consumers and producers in with a promise of intimacy, but fails to deliver the connection between human beings. Many men have destroyed their marriages through pornography. Many a woman has felt degraded because the husband, and I've had to counsel people like this, the husband cannot use his wife unless she pretends to be a porn star, unless she joins him in his imaginations, his fantasies. At that point, he's not loving her. He's not cherishing her. At that point, he's just using her, and any woman would do. And she feels that. She knows that. And she feels diminished in worth. You make her miserable. The use of pornography has rendered men less sexually responsive to real women. Romans 1:27, receiving in themselves that recompense of the error which was meat, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, and it resulted in a state he defines as without natural affection. Men stopped loving their children in a natural way, stopped loving their wife in a natural way. They stop loving in a natural way. Their love turns in upon themselves until the self is diminished and they don't love self anymore. Then they live in regret, shame, and hatred. Listen, pornography will take you further than you want to go and keep you longer than you wanted to stay. You not only will lose your testosterone, but you'll lose your soul. So do these also resist the truth men of corrupt minds reprobate concerning the faith, but they shall proceed no further, for their folly shall be made manifest unto all men. Think what that says. It says, your secret sin is going to be made manifest unto all men. You say, no, I'm going to keep it secret. I'm going to prophesy, okay? It doesn't come from God. It's my prophecy, okay? I'm going to prophesy. Google hates Christians. It hates conservatives. And all the social media, all those tech gurus would like to bring down the right and bring down Christians. So I'm going to tell you what they're going to do. Because if I were the devil and I had the power they've got, it's what I would do. What they're going to do is one day Google is going to publish the names, addresses, and all the video sites viewed by all the right, all the Christians, all the preachers. One day, and it may be this year, maybe longer, but one day somehow it's going to get out. And you're going to be able to go to your computer and type in your name. Anybody will be able to type in your name. And there will be all the porn sites you visited over the last 10, 15 years. Every single one of them. You know what that would do to Christianity? It'd totally destroy it in America. Churches would be empty. You know why? Because half the preachers have viewed pornography. And most of the church members have viewed pornography. And when Christians see that we're basically a bunch of hypocrites and the world sees it, are we going to still have our TV programs and our praise the Lord with all the shame and guilt and embarrassment that's going to come out? Christians are going to crawl into holes and stay there. And the left is going to celebrate. This would be the greatest coup they could do. There's no better way to destroy the right. The right would never win an election again. There'll never be someone stand up and claim he's moral and say he's for the people and he's asking God's blessings on the nation. Never happen. And so it's going to be made manifest. If not now, a little later, and if for some chance Google chooses not to do that out of some self-interest, then the Bible said that in the day of judgment, the secrets of the heart will be made manifest. So it's coming. Think about it. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. So think of it. If it's true, think about it. If it's honest, think about it. Meditate on it. Let that be your imaginations. If it's just, dwell on it. If it's pure, let it be your thoughts in the night. If it's lovely, then think it, share it, and speak it. Whatsoever things are of good report, tell other people about it. Make it known. Shout it from the housetops. If there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. See, you have control of that brain of yours. Now, in my series on the science of addiction of the brain, I go into how you can change your brain back. You can reverse it. I use the science of addiction. I talk about the brain and what scientists and researchers have learned in how to set the brain back and heal it from your pornographic and dope and drug and alcohol and cigarette and every kind of other addiction. So that's enough for now. Get that series if you want to go into this further. I'll have JD put it down on the bottom where you can find it. All right, I don't like doing this. I'm going to have to go out and go fishing or something now. It just makes me miserable to talk about this stuff. Okay, goodbye.